everybody, and welcome back to the Little Woman podcast. Ever since I made the episode Love and Sex in Little Woman in the first season, I've had people asking me about love-making scenes between Joe and Friedrich, and Amy and Laurie, and Meg and John. One of my friends recently posted that she doesn't think that Laurie was in love with Joe. It was more about his sexual awakening. I agree with this because in the book he wants to hook up with Joe without any kind of projection for the future. Even when he proposes, he doesn't have any kind of future planned for them. When he is in Vienna composing an opera and his mind creates the imaginary woman, that is continuance to his sexual awakening. But when he begins to think about Amy and the fantasy woman starts to look like Amy, that is when Laurie begins to fall in love with the real Amy and actually begins to think about the future. I think it is remarkable because Little Woman is also about Joe's sexual awakening with Friedrich and Amy's sexual awakening with Laurie. It is remarkable because in the 19th century, when Little Woman was written, you weren't allowed to speak about sex in general, and such things like female sexuality was a complete taboo. And one of the reasons why Little Woman Part 2 was seen somewhat suspicious in some circles was because the book pretty openly portrayed Joe's sexual awakening with Friedrich. I will read you one of those Joe's sexual awakening moments written by Louisa May Alcott in 1868. And as usual, I believe that this is actually written about Henry David Thoreau. This is from the chapter Surprises when Friedrich comes to court Joe. Quote, "He seldom spoke to Laurie, but he looked at him often, and a shadow would pass across his face, as if regretting his own lost youth, as he watched the young man in his prime. Then his eyes would turn to Joe so wistfully that she would have surely answered the mute inquiry if she had seen it. But Joe had her own eyes to take care of, and feeling that they could not be trusted, she prudently kept them on the little sock she was knitting, like a model maiden aunt. A steady glance now and then refreshed her, like sips of fresh water after a dusty walk, for the sidelong peep showed her several propitious omens. Mr. Bear's face had lost the absent-minded expression, and looked all alive with interest in the present moment. Actually young and handsome, she thought, forgetting to compare him with Laurie, as she usually did with strange men, to their great detriment. Then he seemed quite inspired, though the burial customs of the ancients, to which the conversation had strayed, might not be considered an exhilarating topic. Joe quite glowed with triumph when Teddy got squelched in an argument, and thought to herself, as she watched her father's absorbed face, how he would enjoy having such a man as my professor.
As my professor. As my professor.
As my professor. To talk with every day. Lastly, Mr. Bear was dressed in a new suit of black, which made him look more like a gentleman than ever. His bushy hair had been cut and smoothly brushed, but didn't stay in order long, for in exciting moments he rumped it up in the droll way he used to do, and Joe liked it rampantly erect, better than flat, because she thought it gave his fine forehead a Jove-like aspect. Poor Joe, how she did glorify that plain man, as she sat knitting away so quietly, yet letting nothing escape her, not even the fact that Mr. Bear actually had goat-sleeve buttons in his immaculate wristbands. Dear old fellow, he couldn't have got himself up with more care if he had been going wooing, said Joe to herself, and then a sudden thought born of the words made her blush so dreadfully that she had to drop her ball and go down after it to hide her face. End quote. In the episode Love and Sex in Little Woman, I talked about the 19th century courting rituals. As silly as it sounds, one of them was shared looks. Because people weren't supposed to share their attraction to one another in public, they had to try to show their interest in much more nuanced ways. And this scene is really a reprise of the chapters Joe's journal and friend, where she also goes into long details describing how she thinks that in her eyes Professor Bear is very attractive.